I hope you've had an interesting morning. I wish I was here. I've had an interesting morning. I've been up since 3 because Ma decided it was time for that piece of material that was read to you this morning about the 11, 11, 12, 12, all that heavy cosmic clock stuff. That was originally, I was told in France, was going to be introduced in Dance for Joy, but there's not enough time for that because we have to be ready by that time with all of these activations. So that was given between 3 a.m. and about 8 a.m. And then the rest of the time, I was getting the techniques that weren't in print yet, printed up so you have them to go home with you because they're the most important things. We will get to doing them as well while you're here, but I wanted you to have the written copies to go home. So that's how we kind of like juggled the schedule around a little bit. It's kind of like you have to prioritize when you go into the time crunches. So at this point, I think you got up to, what was it, Technique 14. Okay, so you're up to Technique 14 without Technique 12 because that was one of the ones that was getting done. That will be, it's in about 5 minutes, it's going to be on its way into printing, getting it off the disc. We will run that. That will be the first one that we'll run after the presentation on the beast and those kind of things. But what I'm going to do for this time is the information that I was going to talk about for a while in the morning that has to do with the anatomy of the beast. So we start to understand what this machine is and, how it's affecting us. We will do that now, and there's some Mylars to show that go with that. And by that time, we'll be going up to coffee break again, and there's set breaks that, it's like you leave it sitting there and you have cold coffee if I go over on you. But we're doing not too bad. We're going to get it all squeezed in, and I can just say I would like to thank Azurtanya here, because if it wasn't for the fact that there's 2 of us now, this would never get done. There's just so much work at this point with the new information that's given every time we show up somewhere. And at least that we found out with the information that was given this morning what that golden check mark is that's happening over at Stonehenge. And there's going to be a lot more information in detail given on all of this so we can start to understand, what we're in the middle of and what we're going to see happening. Because with grid activations at this level, there's probably a very good chance that at some point there's going to be more than just bits of flooding in Ireland and Scotland and bits of this here and there. I mean, the planetary body reacts to these frequency interfaces, and we're headed for a real big one on May 27th. So I don't know, we haven't been told there's going to be any particular earthquake here or there, or any volcano is going to erupt or anything like that. But we will keep you posted, and they will give us more information.
And on record too, the words flying around that the Greek trip is fully booked closed, that isn't true.
It isn't?
The organisers are doing their best to find additional accommodation. There are already 215 people coming, but the organiser is actually searching out additional accommodation, and we know it's on Paxos. It's a case of organising it.
Right.
So if you want to come, don't be put off by thinking you can't get there, because presently that isn't true.
Okay. It's kind of like there's still the possibility they'll be able to find other accommodations other than the ones that we'd had when we had a smaller group going. The Paxos thing is kind of interesting because Paxos is Q Site 7, and that connects, there's an interface that connects directly into the Temple of Kemelohati in the inner ecosystem. It's one of the few protected grids spaces, like where they've had full control over the grid space there. And it is a main, if there was going to be a need for evacuation, that would be a main evacuation point. But that's not why we're going. We're not going to, disappear. What we're going to do is help in the process of the Hitharo. And hopefully by the end of this workshop, I will be able to describe to you at least enough that you can leave with an understanding of what this Hitharo word is and what this means to us, because we are going to go through it, the planet's going through it, the galaxy is going to go through it, and the universe, and our universal Vecca is going to go through it on May 27th of 2003. So a lot of the information that was getting downloaded in the last 24 hours, there's like little scribbles on napkins and whatever I had available, because it was just like coming off the CDD plates on what, the technicals of what this is. I didn't have time to draw the diagrams. It would have been, if I had the diagrams to show you, I wouldn't have had the techniques to give you, and you need the techniques more. You can get the diagrams once they come out in the full, once this book is fully complete, they'll be, at least they'll be there, and you can get them off the internet or something like that. So I figured it was most important to get to the technique. But there was a lot of technical data on the Hitharo. It is definitely a process of physics and electromagnetic interface and those kind of things. But we'll talk about the beast a little bit first, because it helps to understand the machine that's responsible for the predicament that we're in right now before we get into the details of what you have to do about the products of the machine. And really what we are dealing with is a machine. It's a machine based on crystalline technology, interdimensional crystalline technology. It's a machine that was built on the original Christos Templar technologies, but those taken and then twisted and used in a perversion of the original divine will. And the divine will created the whole of creation and the amazing structure that we're just starting to learn about with the echo maps of the God world gates and things. So there's a lot of knowledge and a lot of intelligence that went into the manufacture of the Cosmic Templar. When you take even a little piece of that knowledge and begin to twist it into something other than what it was intended to be, you have a very powerful weapon at your disposal. And that's precisely what the races from the black hole systems did. Now, the beast, let me find my pointer. I feel like I missed an arm when I don't have my pointer. I'm missing an arm. All right, we've seen this one before, which just simply describes the interface that we've talked about between our universal stargates, the galactic stargates, and these two other axes of stargates that are now coming through our system that aren't intended to be there. These are the Wisadek and the Phantom interface systems that connect with our gates through our gate 6 and the lock that's between 6 and 7, or as our 8 point, and the other two gate 6s. So it's the 666 configuration. Now, this again just shows you the axis alignment in relation to the Vecca, our universal Vecca map. It's affecting our parallel system as well as our own. And in fact, what they desire to do is use the beast mechanism to create what is called interdimensional torque. And that's like a vortice effect, where you pull enough energy in a certain direction, and they could actually spin the axis of our grid set and snap it from its connection to the Eka universes. And they're aiming to do that at D11.5, where they'd snap it up here. It also means they take out the Agartha temple in the inner Eka system, because that connects to their 3 gate connects to our 11 gate. And if they're going for 11.5, that's halfway into our 12 gate. So it would almost affect their center temple, and if that did, it would take down the whole Eka system as well. This is why this problem has been building for ages now. It started 250 billion years ago with the original Elohai Elohim wars, with the fallen Elohim, the Anu Elohim. And when they originally blew up Stargate 12 in our universal Vecca, they had destroyed this before, which meant they took out the center Eka temple. And there was a huge repair job that was orchestrated ever since. That's where we got Phantom Matrix. They could have closed it then, but they wanted to rescue as much of the life field out of it as they could before that decision had to be made. The life field got corrupted in the Phantom Matrix because of certain groups in the Wisadek Matrix, which wasn't fallen yet. It hadn't fallen, and the Wisadek races had agreed to try to take some of the fallen races from Phantom and try to bioregenerate them by combining them with their genetic templates. And that was allowed by the founders of our Vecca system and their Vecca system. But then they started to do experimentation with that genetic combining that they were advised not to do from this side. But they decided they wanted to do it anyway. And what they did was mutate themselves, and they created a race of things without emotional bodies. What they are the beetle people. They look like large scarab beetles when they're in their natural form, when they're not body snatching something else in human form. And they mutated themselves to the point where they couldn't reverse mutate. All right, shh. Please, Alexa. Yeah. And so anyway, this is where this whole drama began. And at a certain point, there was an assistance being offered by the founders of our matrix that they felt bad for what was taking place in the Wisadek matrix. They were progressively having implosions happen within certain of their Vecca systems because of the decisions they were making, and they had a lot of Templar knowledge, so they had a lot of knowledge to play with as weapons and to make bad decisions with. When they finally ended up imploding their own system partially and turning it into full black hole status, they had a chance then to at least make peace with the decision, realize that the choices they had been making didn't work, that it got them into it in the first place, but they didn't go in that direction. They went in the direction of blame. They blamed the ones who had fallen from this matrix for doing it to them, because if it hadn't been for them, they wouldn't have turned into what they did turn into. It wasn't our guys that made them act the way they did, you know. Once they got into the blame system, they began to apply their intelligence into forming a construct that would preserve their life field at all cost. They decided the way God set it up wasn't right, because if it was, they would still be able to do what they wanted to do, and they wouldn't be facing implosion of their black hole, so they were mad at God. They should have been mad at themselves, because everybody that comes into this matrix agrees to take on the rules of the matrix, which are, it is self-regenerating, and if you bend the rules too far, they will snap back and smack you. And that cause and effect works here. And everybody that comes into manifestation knows that from those levels. When you're at one with God, you know that. God, as us, when we come in, knows that we all agreed to follow the basic rules that would allow the preservation of this matrix. And if we bend them too far, we expect it to be rebalanced. So there's nobody to blame but ourselves if we get ourselves in a situation like that. Once they had created their imploded system, they devised a way of ripping apart templates from one thing, taking half of it and combining it mathematically and electromagnetically with half of their own templates. And that's how they created the Metatronic code. The Metatronic code is base 8. It only has the 8 subfrequency bands per dimension. It runs on reverse mathematical order, so it creates an energy vampiring or sucking system that literally their whole system and its planets and their own bodies, their fields, actually suck energy from the life fields around them or to anything they can connect to. This was their way of sustaining what they consider eternal life. It depends on somebody else having eternal life that they can continue to feed on. And the mechanism that they progressively built since their fall, which I believe their fall was 150 billion years ago. It was quite a bit after the original fall of Phantom Matrix. That's when we had offered an opportunity to create something called the Eye of Metatron. The Eye of Metatron was simply a refraction lens that would allow for a certain interface between Phantom Matrix and their matrix to help get some of them out that could be regenerated, and literally out of both matrices, because they were becoming a danger to all of the matrices around them. And there was going to be a quarantined field set that they could be bioregenerated on before they got fully Metatronic. The entity that was, I believe he was a Riche level entity from, put him probably in the Akasha level worlds. There was a being named Metatron, a collective named Metatron, and it kept sending parts of itself in to try to regenerate its races, because it was part of the original Anu Elohim races that had fallen and then hybridized with the Wisidex. But it lost more and more of its pieces to the mutation until finally the entity itself had fallen. And when that happened, it turned over control of what it had been entrusted with, which was called Metatron's Eye. And it was a polarization refraction lens that would allow for an open current between the Wisidex matrix and the Phantom matrix. Once that was turned over to the Wisidex, they were able to use it to break into not just Phantom, but into our system as well. And that was the beginning of the creation of the beast. That was the birth of the beast. And there have been wars in this universal Vecca ever since that time because of this progressive creation of the beast. The beast is composed of sets of polarization and refraction lenses and other sets of implants that are crystalline based. Some are microchip, very tiny. Others are very, very large, that bend and move light and sound in ways that it was never intended to be bent and moved. It's kind of like what our science does right now, where they, let's try this. They don't know what they're doing. They don't know if they're crushing templates. They don't even know templates exist. But these guys knew templates existed, and they knew how they worked. They had the knowledge of the Templar. And they progressively built a system of Metatronic eye implants, which are polarization refraction lenses, and the hearts, which were the worst of it. The 4 black hearts Metatron implants were put in literally in all of the gates in our system, in the fallen Phantom Matrix system, and connected to ones that were in their own. The Metatronic hearts were the feeding systems, and once they all began beating, it would literally give them enough frequency pull to use their artificially generated light current to literally pull our matrix and our parallel and part of our Eka down into the Wisidex black hole system. And then they'd have lots more billions of years of food to feed on, so they wouldn't have to worry about it. Yeah, then they could do it again. That's what they figured. They literally, the whole story is about Lucifer and all of those things, Lucifer, Satan, and all these guys, and about, once Lucifer was an angel and had a fight with God and, kind of got kicked out of heaven and decided to create his own universe. This is all about the stories that have to do with these people and these beings. So right now we're in the Luciferian drama. We're in the Christ drama at the same time, because they both go hand in hand. In this morning's new information that was given, they kind of explained some of how the Christ and the Christian religion itself and the other religions that are similar but they call themselves something different. This is where all of these belief systems came from, was out of the original Templar knowledge of the Christ and, the Vecca worlds. And it's like we're all in this drama and we fell asleep and all we have left are fairy books to tell us about it. And most of the fairy books don't tell us anything about the big bad ones except its name is Lucifer or its name is Apollyon, because I think some of them use some of the demon names that were assigned. But they're all the same thing. What we're dealing with are people. All right? They are people in a similar way that you and I are people. They have different body forms when they haven't snagged one from somebody else, but they are still a sentient, conscious life form that makes choices and lives the consequences of its decisions. They were created once upon a time, like we were, in the image of God, where we had free will and we had the ability to create and to move in and through manifestation. So they're not some kind of vague little thing like we think about ghosts and all those things you can't quite see. They seem unreal in the science that we're taught here, but they're not unreal. They're just in another time vector than we are, and they're in a black hole time vector. Now, the beast mechanism, what's important about understanding it is there's some very tangible effects of the beast mechanism. There's a lot of intangible ones that you'll see stuff happening on the planet, sometimes pole shifts, sometimes earthquakes, but you can't see the cause of it if you don't know about the beast. But there's one thing you could always see the cause of that's attached to the beast, and that's the presence of wormwood and the presence of Nibiru, planet Nibiru and its battlestar wormwood. Now, the beast mechanism was plugged into the Wormwood Patrol Station in between 25,500 BC and 22,326 BC. It wasn't all done in one full shot. There were agreements made, there were alliances made. There was the alliance that was called the Archangel Michael-Lucifer Alliance, and then is funny, because there's a certain Melchizedek whose name I won't mention that has been talking about that in the last couple of years, and about that being a good thing. Well, what that were the Nephilim Wesedeks making deals with the Toth Anunnaki groups, which are the Toth Enki Anunnaki groups from Nibiru, where they would hand over the full control of the stuff they had on Earth that was controlling the battlestar wormwood, and literally plug it into the beast so it could be used as the beast's final weapon. And of course they were guaranteed territory when they failed, because they knew they'd fall, but they figured they'd been trying to climb up for so long and it hadn't worked, and they kept falling on their faces, and they decided they really didn't like guardians after all. Why should they want to be one? They're better than them anyway. That was really why the Anunnaki, the Toth groups, made the decision to abandon the 1992 Palladian-Syrian agreements and to enter the United Intruder Resistance on September 12th of 2000, where they issued an edict of war against the guardian races. So this is what we're in the middle of, and what it has to do with is, again, our gate systems and pardon my sigh. Now I'll show you a little bit of the anatomy parts of the beast. This is a bigger version of that little one that was on the diagram. That I think you have the little version in your book, but you probably can't read it because it's so tiny. Now, this particular diagram shows several things. It shows, first of all, this structure here with the 1, 2, 3, 4. This is our natural gate system, our universal gate system, the 12 dimensions of it, the 12 gates. It's not showing the inter-echic connection here on this one. It would have been too convoluted. It's showing the interface of the phantom axis and the Wesedek axis, but it's not showing where all their gate jumbles are. It's showing the presence of the universal black heart implants. The way planetary black heart implants activate is because the galactic and universal level ones activate before them, and they send the frequency down, and they downstep it all the way through. So there are ones in the universal scale. Now, these are just the names of our gates. When we get over here, this is called the black cube matrix, and it's interesting because if you look at some of the symbolism that's put on this planet that people worship, and they walk really long distances at least once in a lifetime to go be near. It's a transmission station for this stuff. So it's not just the Christians that are all tangled up and have been lied to and tricked into participating in this drama. It's everybody from every religion has been tricked through the editing and raping of their religious teachings, their original religious teachings, into participating in the Metatronic fire sword activation of this planet without being asked if they wanted to, without being offered a choice. Now, what this shows, this black cube matrix, it's formed these cube structures, which are not a natural structure for gate alignments. All right, it makes an enclosed static structure as opposed to natural Merkaba structures that are actually based on the Akasha Merkaba is based on the crystal shape where you have the 6 sides. All right, when you do a structure like this, it traps energy inside of itself. And the heart implants, all right, these heart implants are the same heart implants here that feed energy from living systems into their system. What you have here is one Cathara grid, and here you have another Cathara grid. There's actually the three Cathara grids woven in together and their gates forced together to form an artificial black cube matrix that forms its own Cathara grid. But its Cathara grid is not only reversed left to right, it's reversed upside down compared to the normal ones. It doesn't plug in to any echoes. It doesn't plug into the universal life force currents, other than through its ability to connect these heart implants into any other living system they can get their little paws on. And it's not very nice what they're doing. They create wormholes, which are using electromagnetic photosonic bursts to literally shatter part of the fabric of a shield. So you can make a slip in time on purpose, a hole through one time frame into another time frame. A lot of these guys are still focused in Atlantis, the part of Atlantis that went to Wisadek. The raising of the Atlantean masters that another person who was teaching about this, whose name I won't mention, that's different from the other one, is heralding the awakening of the old Atlantean masters. What they're heralding is the body snatching of the Wisadeks coming in to start their World War III drama. That's what they're heralding. And just be careful of things like clarion calls. All right, that's one of their little code words. So this beast mechanism ends up forming this unnatural Cathara grid structure that has 11 but not 12 Cathara centers. What that forms in combination with the other systems that they are intending to plug in, this is what they're ultimately trying to create, and they have part of it created already. They need the bottom part of it that has to do with the black heart of Anubis, because that has not been activated fully yet. That's where Earth comes in. And that's why they want to finish Earth off, because through Earth they can get the bottom half of this structure finally online. And if that happens, they can take the Eka down with them. Now, what this structure, this black cube matrix, creates based on its artificial Cathara grid programming is what they call the 7 heads of the beast. Now, the 7 heads of the beast are 7 static, spherical rather than oval-shaped radial body fields that are static radial body fields that are universes. There are suns that hold implants, that hold the electromagnetism of these literally stolen bodies. These are bodies, planetary bodies, pieces of planetary bodies, pieces of suns that were hijacked through the same type of process from either a phantom type matrix or from a living matrix. Now, they have gone after other living matrices as well. It isn't just our Veka that's been assaulted by them, but other matrices have managed to not get quite as in the middle of it as we have. There were certain decisions that were made as far as leaving the phantom matrix open because we had very big hearts, but sometimes we wondered where we put our brains till it was right at the last moment, because we had faith that we could fix it no matter how bad it got when it was time for the cosmic clock to be reset. Other systems called it quits on the healing experiment. If they had any part of them that went into phantom, they would literally cut it out like a cancer before, let it fall, but just don't give these guys an opportunity to invade. We were actually courageous in this universal Veka, and there's a lot of other universal Veka life fields that look to us as teachers, like, wow, maybe we were wrong. Maybe we called it quits too fast. Maybe we give up too fast. Maybe that's not loving enough. Let's see if it works for them. If they can actually extend themselves that far to the point where they almost annihilate their whole ecosystem, not even just their Veka, but they can pull themselves back right off the brink through, anchoring the cosmic clock. If they could do it, meaning us, then maybe we could do it, meaning them, the ones who gave up too soon and felt bad about it. So there's a lot of beings all over the place, some helping us, others just learning from us, and learning from our mistakes, but also from our courage. When we've made courageous decisions like, oh, heck, keep it open a little longer, go ahead, maybe we can still save some of them. But this, at this point, has grown. It's funny, it's in the Bible, it says the 7 heads of the beast, the 7 heads with the 10 horns and all this kind of stuff. The horns refer to their trumpet technologies, and the trumpet technologies are a code word for the photosonic beams that they use. It's infrasound technology, which our scientists have been taught by them. Some of the Zetas have taught them about infrasound, and that you can make buildings shatter by little tiny scalar wave pulses of sound, where you send it through a scalar from one location, pulse it out to the X, and something way across the world falls down, and it looks like there was no reason for it. These are the technologies that this whole thing is built on. The whole biblical story is, it's if it wasn't so sad that people take it so seriously in the way that they do, as if it were spiritual at this point, it would be funny when you see how they have taken the truth of the science of what they've done and they've woven it into a fairy tale. But they have put it right in our faces, just called it something else. And that's one of the tricks they always do. So we have the 7 heads of the beast, and one of them was wounded. Yes, one of them, the one that's not fully operational yet. They tried to get this activated once. I think it was in Seeding 2. And our guys, I don't even have the history records open on it, but this is why it was like, and it was wounded, as if it was there before and then something happened to it. I think they made the connection before, and something was done. I think it was during the 1,000 Years' War period, which ended Seeding 2 on this planet, that the beast's head got wounded, which meant we still got to live over on this side. So the beast with the poor wounded head, the 7th head, is coming back to life. What's kind of funny is the name of, this is their side, this is the Weesadek side, the planets or stars in their system that are holding their gates, that are connecting in through the Metatronic implants to interface with Phantom. You have Athenon, you have Anubion, you have Nabanti, you have Uversa, you have Olympion, Apollyon, Artisma, Morantia, Osirion, Herculon, Urantia, and the Arimathea wormhole that's in Arimathzus. All right. Gee, I wonder what they had to do with the Romans and the Greek stuff, all that, mythology. They had a lot to do with it. All right, those temples and things that the Romans and the Greeks liked to build so much of back in the old days, most of them are APIN activator sites, which means the Atlantean Pylon Implant Network microchip systems have main centers in those areas. Like if you ever go to Greece and go to like the Delphi area, and you go to the Oracle of Delphi, I wouldn't go there if I were you. Because if you want to get Metatronic, that's a good place to sit and let the Weesadeks talk to you. All these places that people are being railroaded and going like, oh, isn't that neat? Oh, wow, the ancient history's coming back and the New Age movement. We all want the history back so much, but they're really being tricked terribly into following something that's meant to lead them like lemmings right off a cliff. And it's just, when you, even some of these names, if you've seen a wide spectrum of what's out there in the New Age movements, I don't know what it's been like in Europe, but in the United States, it's like a feeding frenzy. I mean, channels pop up like every 2 days, and it's just wild over there. There's everything, but they also have a very high level of like exposure of like big paradigms where they have very, very large followings. Thousands and thousands of people are part of their followings, their groupies. And they're groupies because they're taught to just look at them and, oh, okay, what do I do next? Just tell me what to do. They're not told to hold their own power. They don't want them to hold their own power. But these names, all right, some of them you can see the affiliation with the ancient Roman and Greek legends. Other ones, like Nabanti and Uversa and Urantia. Urantia is a giveaway right there, because they actually had the audacity to name one of their published books by that name this time around. There's a book called the Urantia book that is channeled, and it gives a whole history of the human race, supposedly, and it's all this nonsense stuff about, and Jesus' crucifixion and the whole bit. They're taking the story, and they're just weaving the lies with it, because Jesus wasn't crucified. That whole thing was made up to hide the fact that all of this was going on. So it's just, when you see the saturation, you kind of go, oh my God, that really is there. It's been right in front of my face all along, but it's been called another name. It's been called the New Age movement of light and love, except it isn't. It's the New Age movement of light, love, and cluelessness most of the time. And it's the cosmic hijack that's going on. It's fine to be New Age if you're willing to be aware, but so many people they just want the light and love so they can tune out reality and float on clouds. And they're promised that that's what they'll be able to do when they ascend. And the ones who are telling them how to ascend want them to ascend right down here. It's called descension from our perspective. But they won't know the difference, the people that go that route, until it's too late once they're in there. So this is the thing that's choosing to call itself our adversary. See, we don't pick adversaries. We don't have any enemies. We have family and friends that forgot they were, and therefore might choose an adversarial stance to us. But that doesn't mean we don't love them. But it does mean we're not stupid enough to let them destroy us or to continue causing harm to themselves as well, because they are harming themselves as they do this. we're going to see that on this planet as they start to go at each other, taking on human bodies, and orchestrating wars on our planet with some of our people stuck in the middle of it. And it's going to be heart-wrenching. Because what they have done, that right now, and since about 25,500 BC, there has been a huge campaign of what's called overshadowing. Overshadowing is a step before possession, all right, where they just hang out in the astral field. And they pop in and use the body when they want to, and then pop back out. But they're still part of the original soul in there. And the original soul kind of goes, sometimes they don't even remember that they did something. They might have go murdered somebody, and they don't have any memory that they murdered them, because they didn't. Their body was used to do it. So this is some of what we're going to see as the dramas progress here politically. And that's the heart-wrenching part, because there's still part of the original soul left in there. And they're the people that, we can help, but you can't help them this way from, 3D, because they're not going to be allowed to be open to information like this. As soon as they try to get interested, they'll be shut right down by the overshadow dancer. So what you do is you work with them on the astral levels once you get your own fields clear. We'll be able to help people like that by the flame body activations that are happening on a planetary level. But it is a big drama as far as what we're used to. Compared to what we've actually been through but forgot, it's actually quite small. Because there have been times when whole blocks of galaxies were taken out in the wars that they launched to fight over who was going to get what grids once they took them, and to try to push through the field. We would put force fields up. That was the Guardian stance. They didn't very often go around blasting things unless it was a mechanical apparatus. They'd blast your mechanical apparatus and get it out of there, but they didn't attack their planets or anything like that. Once in a while you'd get one or two that got caught in trying to get rid of part of the beast thing, and that was unfortunate. But anyway, when we're dealing with the beast, we're dealing with this thing. It's also called the Seven Heads. It's another name for them that's a very popular name these days, and it's called the seed of artificial life. All right, this is taught as a core teaching in a certain. I think this is actually the seed and the egg. This might be the egg of life part of the seed of life, but this is the core teachings that mathematics that there's certain systems here that the Thoth people, whoever, like the people who are channeling Thoth, talking to Thoth, have been abducted by Thoth in his spaceship, those kind of people that are being taught high grid mechanics and those kind of things. They are being taught all about this paradigm and how to do grid work to make sure it falls. So there's going to be, now that we're coming into a situation that on May 27, 2003, there's this huge, massive thing called the Hitharo that's going to happen, that's literally going to begin the process of resetting the cosmic clock in the parts of the grid that can hold it. They are going to be so busy running around doing grid work to get those Metatronic implants activated. And at this point, it's all right that they do. It's not something that needs to be stopped at this point, even if it could be. It can't be stopped without ripping the planetary grids apart, and that's not going to help anybody. But just like our groups will be moving around to do, their work with anchoring the flame bodies and anchoring what's called the 13th pillar, which is that Amareya flame from literally the Akasha Ea level, bringing it all the way down through the central gates. We'll be doing those things, and I wouldn't doubt it if they're sitting on the island right next to us. I mean, we found out there's a group of them going to Greece. Well, we're going to Greece, like right at the same time frame. This has been happening, and I didn't know why for a long time. They're going to Crete? Okay, we were there too. But this thing where I used to think that who is following who here, because we get guidance to go to like a certain area to do grid work, and one of their other groups would show up, and we'd like look at each other like, hello, what are you doing here? I was thinking, I don't think they like me. Okay, and I couldn't figure out why in the beginning, why they weren't friendly. Now I know. But they will be going and doing their activations works. They'll have big workshops, and they'll have, big hooplas and all sorts of things. And all they're doing is running the Blue Sword currents. That's where lots of people are going to get their initiations. And there'll be all these rebirths that happen, where whoever was in that body, you're not going to hear what they have to say about it. But there will be these activations that take place, and then there'll be this, a release and tears and the emotion like, I feel like I have a new life. Yeah, you do. You just snatched a body and you got in here, didn't you? You're going to see the birth of the magenta races. And once a being has been magenta-ized, the original soul is no longer in it. So you're not dealing with who the person was before at all. They will adopt its personality imprint, so they know how to respond, because they don't have emotional bodies of their own. So if they're going to try to pretend they're human and they stole a human costume, they still need to know how to act. so they don't appear very weird and get themselves locked up or something like that. So they adopt the personality imprint where they can feign love. It's like being an actor on a stage. Oh, in love with this. There's a drama about them that's quite amazing, where there's almost a childlike fascination with things like emotion and sensation and those kind of things. And the thing is, it is kind of childlike because it's the first time they've got this close to being able to feel anything. And they can feel when they're in the bodies that they snatch temporarily until they fully reverse and go down into their hole, because you can't feel stuff when you're in that hole. You can think until you turn blue, but you can't feel. And it's a really miserable reality. I would think I would want to be a finite being if I could think, but I couldn't feel. If I could create, but my creations would mean nothing to me because I couldn't feel them. So, anyway, I just throw those little kind of like pieces in among structures of the beast. So basically, we got this structure. We have the black cube matrix that is the fusion through the Metatronic heart implants of the phantom matrix, the Weesadek matrix, and the parts of our gate system that they're planning to plug into this. And they are the 7 heads of the beast. And that shows where the black cube thing fits into the egg of life, or seed of life thing. And it shows where the hearts are. And it shows also where these eyes are. The eyes are the smaller lenses. They do different things than the hearts do. The heart implant systems literally combine current. How they make the artificial D13 reverse current is they use the heart implants to pull D6 reverse frequency from phantom matrix, because they're already in reversal, but they're not in Metatronic reversal. And then they take D7 frequency, reverse frequency from their side, and then they force it together through this electromagnetic transduction process that I'm sure they would probably even give me the details on if I asked, but I'm afraid to. I don't even want to see what that transmission would look like, because this technology is extremely sophisticated. I'd probably have to go study particle physics just to be able to have a vocabulary that you could translate these part of the plates into. But these are the combiners. These are like turbines that combine the currents of the phantom and the Weesadek matrix. And what it does is they only have 11.5 base 8 capacity, which isn't as strong as 11.5 base 12 capacity, because they're losing 4 subharmonics or 4 subfrequency band every dimension. What they're trying to do is build an equivalent current, and they just about figured out how to do it, where they could tap in to our D12 and get something else. They already got the Eye of Metatron. What they want to do is get this thing up here that's called the Eye of Brahman. That was the original polarization refraction lens that was put in here 250 million years ago when Stargate 12 was blown up. And it had to be repaired, and it's still under repair. I mean, this is the last of the repairs, actually, in that whole system. But this one has been under Guardian protection since it was created, and it allows an interface to the ecosystems. This is how the Halls of Amente Stargate interfaces were created, where they could literally, through the Eye of Brahman, create kind of like a splint would be on a broken bone that would support the original structure until it could heal. So what the Weesadaks really want to get is control of the Eye of Brahman. If they get control of the Eye of Brahman, they will be able to generate not just a D13 reverse base 8 current, but enough of a current that they could take out our full, it would be stronger than our full D12 base 12 current, which means they could capture the inner Earth ecotemple, which means they could really run rampant and cause lots of trouble all over the ecosystems and the Akasha systems. And that won't be allowed, but that's what they want to do. Shows how crazy they are. I mean, you have to be crazy to, if you look at the structure and how big creation is, and the structure and the order that goes with it, you have to be crazy to attempt to take down God. I mean, come on, right? What if you won? What if you won? I mean, then what do you do? So you collapse all of creation. Hate to tell you, you're part of all of creation. You're going to go too. There's just like a level where it shows, their mutation shows, where no matter how intelligent and brilliant they might be intellectually, they're still, like you're saying, as few bricks short of a load, he says. It still shows, because there's some things that just are not rational in the ways that they behave, even though they can think brilliantly. So, next one, please. Thank you. I'm going to have microphone elbow someday soon, I think. It's like tennis elbow, but for microphones. Okay, now, this is just a quickie to move on to the next one. This is just like a refresher. This is just like, remember our universal gate system, our galactic gate system, the inner ecosystems and the 311 interface connection here, and the 411 interface connection to our parallel the Eka connects at the 4 gate to our parallel. That's just to remind you of that in our what we call our galactic plane. The galactic Merkaba is here. What they're trying to do is rip the galactic Merkaba right out and take it down, take it in opposite spin, and take it down and use it as torque to generate enough of a movement field. They would literally, to do this, they would have to stop, have the sun stop, generate enough counter pull to actually slow the sun and then stop it, which would stop the orbit of everything around it. Hold enough of the static field up so everything doesn't just fall out of the sky. Or, I wonder where it would go. It didn't have an organized path to fall into the black hole. Where the heck would it go? If you just kind of snap its orbitals, where you stop the sun, everything just goes bloop, like falls on the floor like tennis balls. But there's no floor down there. I don't know. Anyway, the thought just occurred to me where I was seeing like planets fall like tennis balls. Maybe that's what it looks like when they go in black holes. I don't know. But anyway, this is the galactic Merkaba here, and they are trying to reverse its spin, and they're going to use wormwood to do that. So wormwood becomes part of the beast apparatus. Now, actually, next one, please. Am I disturbing you? I'm sorry. I know. Yeah, I think that's the bottom. Yeah. Okay, now. The black cube matrix, the heart implants, all of that stuff we saw in the other graph, when we plug it into our universal gate system, there's our galactic gate system. Again, that's the inner Eka up there. This over here is the parallel. This jumble of mess that looks like a cancer, and actually this is where cancer comes from. It is the Metatronic implants and the Christos template fighting for control of the energy in the body, and when it goes Metatronic, it begins to consume itself, and that's where we get the diseases like cancer. There's also other diseases that are directly connected to these implants. But here you have that wasn't clear on the other one before, but you can see it here, where we have our gate system coming out. We have our gate 4, our gate 5, our gate 6. Then you have this other gate 6 that's coming in from this matrix here, which is the Wisadek matrix, because their gates run upside down compared to our Cathara grid and the Phantom Cathara grid. And then you have the Phantom Cathara grid ones, I believe. This is Phantom, right? Yeah, Phantom axis coming up here. Its gate 6 lands up here. Wisadek comes in this way. Its gate 6 ends up here, and our gate 6 is there. And that's right at our 6-7 Azure point. All right, that point where the Amaray flame comes down. If they got control of this through the 666, they've created a triangulation. And it's actually a pyramidal triangulation. Pyramids, the pyramid shape, that was their idea. That was their structure, because it's based on their base 8 mathematics, the way they build pyramids. And it's meant to triangulate and amplify energy in specific ways. And it's also one of the forms that allows the link. If on the black cube matrix diagram, if you'd noticed, I don't know if you noticed, but at the top you had cubes going down, but there were two little pyramids, one at the top and one at the bottom, that connected them and made the points of them. They use the pyramidal mathematics through this gate construct. This is built on the pyramidal mathematics. Now, what they have in mind is the activation of the Metatronic implants to where the 4 black heart implants activate, and they begin to run through our system. They've already run it through part of Phantom, but through our entire gate system, the flaming blue sword of Archangel Michael, and that's the D13 reversed base 8 current, called the flaming blue sword. When it comes in through this triangulation, the 666 gate triangulation, and then it spreads out very quickly horizontally and then shifts axis and goes vertically. And it creates what's known as the sign of the beast. Do you know how many people wear the sign of the beast on their foreheads or in their right hands? We have been tricked here. The cross, the natural cross, is even. Like even the Native Americans used to use that. The Celtics used to use that because they were directly descendant from the Grail lines. The cross that has the top bar moved up where it's shorter on top, that's what it's referring to. The gate connection that would break this gate system off right here, cut it off at the 11.5, and take this whole system down in, is also the shape of the currents that come in as the flaming blue sword. That's why they call it the flaming blue sword of Archangel Michael. And when you cut this gate off, what you get is not a natural construct that you can trace it and make all these. You know how our Vekas are built on the even crosses, right? You have the center point and you have the 4 Cathara grids that intersect evenly. That is the natural sign of the cross. This is the sign of the Wysadek black hole system and what it intends for this system. Now, if the beast were to activate, which it has done, what it would do, it goes on autopilot too, just like our Templar goes on autopilot. If there's a certain degree of grid damage that takes place that threatens to take down the Echoes or the Akashas, literally the cosmic level of the cosmic clock and the consciousness that's composed of, it's set on autopilot. The gates begin to open. And if the gates don't open because there's nobody on the other side to help open them, it means that that particular, if you're going to try to send helping frequencies from the 12 Rushe pillars into a gate system and there's nobody there to open the gates, it means the place has been so damaged and so invaded, it doesn't matter if it rolls when you bring them in. So you just bring them in and you force them through the gates. They would have had to do that here if the Indigos hadn't survived on the planet and in other places in the galaxy. But the Indigos hold the gate codes and the lock codes, and they can run the frequencies to allow the planetary shields to receive the arcs or the Rushe pillars, which will allow the cosmic reset button, which is what's being reset here, the divine blueprint is being anchored again, to be anchored without causing pole shift and without causing all that. Now, if this were allowed to happen, I'll show you on another graph in a minute what else it would bring in. We'll show you where Wormwood and Nibiru fit into that. But it's not going to be allowed to happen because of the checks and balances system built into the Universal Templar and the Cosmic Templar. What will happen, though, is the inner Eka gates, after they receive all their activations from the Akasha Ea down to the Akasha, down to the Eka, then they will open their gates to allow the frequency to come down into our Veka system. The funny thing is, you know how time gets really weird, even when you think of science? When you see light in the sky that's a star, you're actually seeing the distant past because of the speed of light and the time it takes to get here. We're getting these activations now. But they actually they were released in a part of our very, very distant past that's also a part of our very, very distant future. It's very confusing when you start to try to process linear time as we know it here through a mutated gene code, through the actualities of the speed of light and what time is as a pulsation rhythm. But all of this action is happening now, and what's happening is Earth is aligning with the places of now that this is happening in. This is the path of ascension for Earth, because if it doesn't align with that, it will align with the fall, and it will do it again. It will repeat its karma again, the planet will, because this planet has fallen and fallen and fallen. It started out from Aramatena when it was in density 4, and gate 12 blew up. And then we ended up with it in density 3, and we had the Gaian drama, where Gaia, the Earth's oversoul body, was. That almost imploded. Then we had the pieces of it down in Terra in density 2, and then Terra almost completely imploded, but there's still part of it left. And then we have our system that was created out of that. So there's a whole history here that's encoded in our literally not cosmic, universal level template of this planet of repeating the fall. This is the point where, if it gets repeated once more, it's going to be permanent. We're going to, go live in Wysadek and have a few billion years of evolution to have them be our creator gods and push us around. Doesn't sound like a nice trip to me. So, with this beastly item, this flaming blue sword of Archangel Michael, this will also, if you remember that this is a Cathara grid, right? Now, this gate cluster mess here, connecting through our Azure point. We have a Cathara grid in our bodies, true, remember? This is exactly what it does in the Cathara grid in our bodies as well. When it activates, when the blue sword activates, it literally forces its way through the Azure point. It reverses what would be called, you considered your monadic core, which is like in Chakra 8 and Cathara Center 8, reverses that into complete reversed mathematics, and then completely puts the whole system into what's called monadic reversal, where the mathematical programmings on the whole thing are reversed. Once that's done, anything that's base 12, most of our base 12 is shut off right now because of the planetary grid distortions. It shatters the template from the subharmonics of 9 through 12, and then takes 1 through 8 and fuses it into the Metatronic bond with one of the dancers, or if it's a planet, one of the pieces of grids of something they've got before. So it gets very personal. It's not just what's happening up there in the stars and what might be happening in another country that has a gate that's going to have an issue. It happens right in our bodies, too. We get Metatronics from the inside out. And that's why we have to heal from the inside out. That's what the flame body activations are for. And this is why we wanted to give you those yesterday. So by the time you looked at this, you didn't have to be upset about it. because you already know the solution, and you're already halfway through the solution. You're more than halfway through the solution. And the other techniques that we have to do tonight are not very long, fortunately. They're short ones compared to some of the others. Those were the real hard ones, the first flame body activation levels. They were brutal, some of them. I remember taking them down. What number are we on, Steph? How many? And then the next one would be that long. And I said, oh, my God. I said, people aren't going to do these. Are you kidding? How are they going to do these? But people are doing them. And I'm really proud of everybody for kind of suffering through that, because that's kind of tough. Meditations that are like 50 steps long are a bit much, But that is the solution. It's the solution for this on this level, too. Now, this was the original thing that was going to go down when they activated the beast on March 23rd of 2002. They activated it early. Instead of 2011, the United Intruder Resistance people, who were the little Illuminati operatives of the Weesadek and the fallen races, they activated it early because the Guardian races were having too much success in healing grids back to the 12th code. We'd gotten actually enough of the CDD plate information out that it was helping Indigos to wake up, and yet wake one up and it sparks 4 more somewhere else on the planet. So they were getting very frustrated with the fact that there wasn't going to be any grids left to fight over if we kept doing what we were doing. So the Indigos were under a lot of psychic attack, during these periods, sometimes right in your face. If you can't get you psychically, well, I'll just push you around physically, that kind of thing. There's a lot of that going on. They activated the beast to try to head that off at the pass, because they knew one thing happens when you activate the beast. The planetary shields do what's called phase lock, which means they phase lock into one angular rotation of particle spin, and they will pass through the Stargate opening cycle at that particle spin angle. Now, there's only one thing that can release that, and that's called the Hitharo. All right, phase lock occurred in the grids on March 23rd of 2002, and that's when we went immediately into Plan B. Now, Plan B has several aspects that I kind of mentioned on Friday when we talked. The first part of Plan B was probably figuring it was going to do pole shift here, because they would have to not let this happen, because they can't let the entire universal, Vecca be taken out and then take the Eka out too. So the Amaray, what are called the Amaray arcs, were going to be brought in. These green things, the emerald arcs, are actually arcs of the central flame, the Amaraya central flame from the Eka level, were going to be, allowed to come down here through the gates to anchor into our gates, and they would actually create these pillars of suspension that would hold up whatever grids whatever parts of the shields, the galactic shield, the universal shield, and our planetary shield, that could plug into them, whatever had anything base 8 left when that phase lock occurred, that those arcs would plug into them, and whatever couldn't plug into the arcs would have this run through it. That's what we're looking at in May. All right, it's going to go one way or the other. But it's got better since they first told us about Plan B. When they first told us about Plan B, I could feel it, that they were, I know they give about a 3-month warning to where, like 3 month, all right, get off the planet training. And they weren't going into that yet, but I could feel it around the periphery, just in their emotional bodies, like they were worried it was going to get really close. But something a set of events, really wonderful kind of took place, wonderful in a way anyway. The beast, as it was set in motion, there's still another thing called the date activation key codes that needed to be put in. The Guardians couldn't tell us when what was going to start flying down here until that second set of codes was entered into the beast. It started activation on March 23rd with activation of the Avalon seal, which is that implant that's in the, I think it's the D11.5 implant. And I can't see it on here. I don't have them marked on here. Actually, I do. It's right up in there. All right. With activation of the Avalon seal. But there's still the time release codes that need to be put in, which basically tells you when and how fast you want that to send frequency down into the 666 configuration to trigger the opening of this that will allow the blue sword to come through. That was entered into the codes while we were in Bermuda. I believe it was July 24th. I think it was the 24th when they entered it. Yeah, that's our wedding anniversary. We were in Bermuda. And we found it was another one of these, like we got the dispensation while we were on the trip to Bermuda. Oh, by the way, they just did this. Now we can tell you when the beast is going to activate, when it's going to start running through the grids. Because once those codes were set, there's a very specific series of events that take place where it's known how fast what travels and how long it's going to take to get to where. So it was at that point they knew that it would be May 27th of 2003 when this came flying down through our grids. and the universal grids, when our grids would align with the universal blue sword. At that point, it was still very iffy as to whether, okay, do we do evac training right now, or do we just give a little more time? Because there was something that the Guardians knew. They'd warned them a long time ago that, this might not work and you might just hurt yourselves. Well, they activated the beast early, and what they didn't count on was something called a 31 to 51% divine blueprint phase lock, which meant the universal shields, galactic shields, and planetary shields here and other planets in our system had a 31, they had the majority of the grids had between 31% and 51% of their divine blueprint left. That's not enough to break free and clear the Metatronic implants, but it's not enough to fall peacefully. So they end up stuck together. What that does is keep the radial body net, that static net that they have, that they have in our fields right now. It keeps it open. So when the Christos side begins to run Christos frequency, it will run through their side too, and their side can't handle a base 12 current. What it was going to create was a red pulse. It's called a solar red pulse. Solar red pulse is a natural part of any Stargate opening cycle. It usually occurs around the end of it. And it's literally just a last kick, a frequency that the sun sends out when the universal and galactic grids hit a certain level, and it sends it out on the D1 frequency. That's why it's called red pulse, because the D1 red frequency band, light spectra, sends it out. And usually, if a planet's shields are working well, it just passes right through, and it gives the grids its final acceleration so all the gates can open. Now, if the grids are damaged, a red pulse vaporizes anything that can't hold it. Literally just crushes its template instantly, and poof, it's gone. It turns ashes to ashes, dust to dust, the quick way. So what this meant was their net that they were intending to separate after they pulled most of our fields down in here, they were planning to not have any open doorways in their net into this system, so they would be gone and they would have pulled it down before these arcs came in. That's what they were hoping. When they activated it early, they realized that it was going to be iffy. So they attempted to attack the Agarthan temple at gate 311, the gate 311 connection up here. That was going on. That was bizarre. Well, we were in Bermuda up here, 311, where am I? You can't even see it in the jumble up here. Yeah, right there. It's 311 connection. They had attempted to use photosonics to attack the Agartha temple, gate 3, just to blow it up so it couldn't run the Amaray arcs. But it didn't work. And that meant they were in trouble, because their beast was going to bite them. It got out of the cage. They let it out of the cage. And it wasn't just going to create red pulse and vaporize people here. It was going to vaporize a good portion of their black hole system as well. They can't handle having a red pulse run through that system, and this would have left the gate open for the natural red pulse over here to come flying through. It would have also taken out most of the life forms on this planet and part of its planetary body as well. So they did what, it was almost like, we told you so. We told you it could be dangerous to do what you're doing. There was something called the Treaty of Loving Mercy that was agreed upon in, I believe it was August 1st of 2002. It is not a peace treaty. They don't want to be at peace with us, but they've agreed at least not to antagonize us if we help. Now what they want help with is being able to, they don't want to give up their drama. They don't want to become Christos. They want their matrix. But the majority of them, which are the United Intruder Resistance Nephilim Wisadax instead of Wisadrax, they're the base Anunnaki ones. They're the stronger force over there, and the Drax hate them. The Wisadrax hate them because they're constantly trying to destroy the Wisadrax. Well, the big groups, the United Intruder Resistance, would have some Wisadrax in them, but they're mainly an Anunnaki control group. Made these agreements. They're the ones that are the Knights Templar people. They also started the Protestant religion movements where the Drax were moving the Catholics. I mean, literally, it goes all through our history, And I had like both, I had my uncle's a priest, my father was Catholic, my mother was Protestant. We were a holy war in the family, So it's like, I don't say that being outside of any of that. I was a part of that too. But what has happened with the Treaty of Loving Mercy is, A, assault on indigos in general by this group, these groups at least, has to stop. All right. Now, B, we're kind of in a position where if we didn't negotiate, it wasn't going to do anybody on this side any good either, because nobody here is going to be able to withstand a red pulse yet. So it was in both interest to agree to do one thing that was a thing that they had agreed to do in the first place in the 1992 Palladian-Syrian agreements, except they'd agreed to do it in about 2,000 years. They were going to get 2,000 years more of evolution here to get their gene codes out before the Hitharo. they agreed to allow the Hitharo. Now, if they hadn't, we would have had to fight our way into, like physically, fight our way into grids that are controlled by other people who don't want us there. It wouldn't have worked. I mean, they would have killed us. But because we were invited, we've been being invited to certain grid areas that are controlled primarily by the Knights Templar people, that we can run the codes that will allow the anchoring of the Vekas, the Ekas, the Scepters, and the Ruche codes. Because with the Hitharo, it is the way to use what they call Pillar 13, which is the Amareya flame that comes down all the way down the center, to create a separation in the templates, a natural separation in the templates. If you have this thing running, and you bring the center beam down with it, the center beam, which would be stronger than just the smaller arcs, the center beam will sustain more of the grids, but it won't go into the grids that are holding the blue flame, because they're already coded to that. It will allow the shields, whatever part of the shields that are fully Metatronic and you can't fix, to go with the blue sword. It won't stop the blue sword, but it will change its angle of projection, which will make it less intense, where it just doesn't blast the heck out of the planetary body like it was going to do. It will also, it's kind of funny, and this is the part they weren't too happy about because they knew it was going to happen with the Hitharo. There's a graph, I'll show you in a minute, that, I'll show them this one in a minute, and I want to do these two yet. I'll show, I'll show this one first, then I'll show that one. Okay. Yeah, like the one right here. Yeah. Now, if that was going to be the normal story that would have created all sorts of rocking and rolling, it would have created this if we hadn't gone into this Hitharo plan. What this is, there's the blue sword again, right? This red orbit here is the orbit that Nibiru and Wormwood go in on. They come up through our system and they circulate back out into Phantom, and they come up past Phantom Earth where we don't see them, and then they cycle out again. What the beast does, normally Wormwood would come into our system this way, at this projectile, would come up, and come up under our galactic plane through the lock, the galactic lock that's between, make it come in faster. And then when it came in faster, once it came up through our lock system, it was going to actually blast it right about here from Jupiter with this big blue, kind of piece of this stuff, blue sword. And that was going to knock it, so it didn't go in this orbit anymore. It would do this ricochet orbit, and it would go around the sun, and it come around the sun this way, which is like the sun is over here. It would go around the sun, it would come around Earth and come between Earth and the sun. And that final pass between Earth and the sun would completely devastate Earth. The thing is bigger than Earth is. You put a body bigger than Earth is between Earth and the sun, moving at that speed, at that ricochet angle, it's going to whip it right out of orbit. But what it would first do is it would slow the sun to a stop. That was the first part of the plan, which would slow. It's like putting on the brakes on the, literally the whole galactic orbit, where things start to like knock into each other and that kind of thing. Once it was slowed sufficiently, this thing would continue to go. It would continue to use Wormwood, and it would pull it into the opposite spin. It would take it into clockwise, full clockwise spin, when it should be going on a counterclockwise spin, or Merkaba. And what that would do is rip the whole system out up here and take it down into a black hole. Now that was what they originally had planned with Wormwood and with the beast mechanism. But once they let the beast out and it started to threaten to bite them, and they agreed to the Hitharo, this is what this will do. Next one, please. How are we doing on time? Oh, that's not too bad. It's 4:45. How'd you do that? Oh, they let you do that. Good. Because I'd heard before that after 4 they wouldn't serve coffee. Okay, cool. Okay, now. Yeah, they're our buddies, I'm sure. Okay, here we go. Here. Now this is what's going to happen. Now remember in the other diagram it showed the 666 gate configuration. It showed the arms of the blue sword cross coming out this way and the big blue sword coming down that way, right? And it looping through over here and doing the same thing in the galactic Hitharo. And it showed the mess over here with that messing up the cycle of Wormwood's projection. Well, with the activation of the Avalon seal, which happened on March 23rd of 2002, that already accelerated the pull of Wormwood. It's coming in a lot faster than it was intended. That can't be stopped, particularly putting it back to its normal, where it would have gone in its normal orbital pattern. That's already too late. But what the Hitharo will do. And the Hitharo starts, I believe it started on November 5th when we were in France. Yeah, with the beginning activations of, the flame body codes we've been being given. But what the Hitharo will do is the Hitharo refers to, first of all, and I wish I had the diagrams to show this. I'm just working them out to try to, show this thing in pictures because it's easier in pictures. But basically, if you have one reverse current coming in and you hit that reverse current at 45-degree angles at the same time in the right velocity with two not reverse currents. It's kind of like, let's say this is a negative electrical pole and you have two positive electrical pole currents coming in, but it's not just negative versus positive in electrical poles. We're also talking about reverse versus not reverse mathematics. But if you hit the center one at the Azure point when it starts to activate, when the blue sword would start to come in with two beams coming, and they would come from the Eka systems of very specific ratio and velocity compared to the blue sword. It would actually, I think they gave the ratios, the smaller electrical ones, each would have to be, if this is D13 reverse, each of those would be a D6.5. They have to be smaller at first. Now when they come in and hit in the 666 gate location, there's something in the 666 gate location that's called the Metatronic implant. That's that 666 Apollyon Metatronic seed atom. Well, when the blue sword starts coming up through the Metatronic seed atom and they project into it those frequencies of the D6.5, D6.5 positive charge, and they hit at the same time, it has to be exactly at the same time as the blue sword begins to pop up through the gates. When that happens, a very interesting phenomena of physics happens. There's a phase lock that occurs where a little Manu window opens up in the side of the Metatronic seed atom, which is a little space that's connecting to you can actually run the Amareya pillars through, the central pillar through later, but there's stuff that has to happen to it first. That little window in the center of the blue sword current that has become phase locked. See, the diagram kind of looks like this. I have it scribbled somewhere. It's just on paper. It's not legible to most people right now. But there would be two currents of, like the green ones, the good ones, coming in. Right at the same time, the blue one was going to open up and try to do its crossbar thing here. They would all phase lock in there. They get stuck together in the seed atom temporarily. And because this one, when it's first coming up, is actually stronger, it would begin to pull both of those currents up toward it and inside of it. You have a positive charge, negative charge. Bigger negative charge pulling the two of the positive charges into it. So the two smaller Amareya rays would actually end up inside of the blue sword. You have to be careful what you swallow these days because it can really cause indigestion, and this is what this would do. But because they're two positive charges, right? These would be two positive charges in the negative charge of the blue sword. Let me see, I'm trying to remember this. They just taught me this. Okay, it's not on anything here. Okay, how do they go? All right. The magnetic pull on these, the further they try that the magnetics of the sword try to pull those two currents together inside of itself, the more of an electrical repulsion field gets generated, a static field gets generated in between the two, because the closer the two get together, you start having the electrical versus electrical interaction. And it creates a static field that builds and builds in the center of the sword until eventually the static field reaches 3 times the strength of the original sword current. These have oscillated to the point, I mean, the more they're pulling and fighting with each other, trying to, the counter force and force, particle accelerates the two Amareya beams that are in there. So they get to each one of them doubles the original current that the blue sword was. So what happens is inside of itself, all of these currents become bigger. And when they become bigger, there is a certain point where these ratios of the static field in between that's running in the center of the Metatronic seed atom reaches 3 times the original thrust of the blue sword current, and each of the two smaller Amareya currents have reached double the original strength of the Amareya current. Once that ratio is reached, that is what's called the Hitharo peak. And at the Hitharo peak, the Hitharo, the word means the great silence, where everything stops. And I haven't looked it up yet, but there's a part in Revelations in the Bible that says something about everything stopping or going quiet for a space of an hour. And it's really eerie because it is about an hour that it would take in our terms. Now, what it will do Once those ratios are built inside those flame interactions, those arcs, they're called, if you want to look at them as all the blue arc and our green arcs, okay, it splits that metatronic seed atom. It splits the seed atom. When it splits the seed atom, some of what I know it does, I mean, we didn't get to the point where we have the heavy analysis on it, but the most important thing it will do first is it'll go through, before it splits, there's an hour, like right before it splits, and that's that hour of silence. And I don't know what that's going to look like or feel like, but it's literally where all the oscillation, the particle acceleration that was going on inside of the beam, all the static field stuff, everything stops. And it just enters stasis and kind of phase locks temporarily. And it's the quiet before the Big Bang, because then it literally blows the seed atom apart. When it blows the seed atom apart, what was the original current that was coming down, would have been the blue sword coming down this way and its crossbar this way, it literally shifts it splits the blue current in half and shifts it 45 degrees, so it comes in, it's not coming down the vertical anymore, and the two that have been coming in 45 degrees phase lock together and become one. So what it constitutes is the pillar, that what's called the 13th pillar, the Amaraya arc that can come all the way from the top, at that point can fully anchor through that central pillar of the Amaraya, while at the same time it doesn't stop the blue sword from running. It changes its angle, and it changes what gates, like where it will come in. It won't come through the central gates, and it won't, when it hits, it won't be as powerful. But one of the most important things it will do at first is its shift in angle will hit where they normally would pulse wormwood to make that ricochet around the sun. It will hit before it comes up through our lock. Well, this is what we're aiming for anyway, as long as whoever's on the other side of that trigger has a good aim, you know. But I do believe it's already preset. I don't think it has to do with anybody pointing it. I think the pillars themselves know how to point it. But what part of the thing that's going to happen it's like literally, I think a minute or two after, I have to see if that's correct, but it's very, very close to the point where that 1 hour of silence releases and the metatronic atom splits. They're going to send the beams in. That beam is going to come in by its own, and that's when wormwood would be coming up through the lock, and it's going to hit it hopefully before it gets here, and turn it into lots of pieces of asteroids that fly around down in Phantom, where it would end up in the Phantom orbits, not here. Because if that comes through and they miss, I don't even want to see the dispensation on what do we do now after that one. But the plan of the Hitharo is this. Now the Hitharo starts with, there's a whole series of very complicated things that you got a little taste of this morning with that new dispensation about what you need to activate first to actually anchor the 12 Ruche pillars. Now the 12 Ruche pillars will reset the divine blueprint on the cosmic level, and they will generate and activate the entire Akasha A, a flame body, all the way up, enough to give support to the universe for this mess to occur. Because what's going to happen, it's not just going to be this, but that flaming blue sword is going to reassemble itself. After the Hitharo point, it swings back together into original axis. So what you'll have is you'll have the 13th pillar, the Amaraya flame, running down and already anchored, and you will also have the blue sword coming back, where it will run. And whatever part of the grids at the Hitharo are phase locked into Metatronic critical mass, they will run the blue sword. And whatever part of the grids are phase locked. There's another part of this too that they haven't told me yet, but somewhere in that hour, I think there's a huge transmutation that takes place. Anything that can be reversed back to its divine blueprint that's not fully Metatronic will be. This is why we have to get our shadow bodies in shape for this. But whatever can hold the Amaraya arcs will hold the Amaraya arcs and go on the ascent path. And whatever can't will run the other. There's no choice. You run either one or the other. So the people on this planet and this planet itself and this universe and this galaxy are either going to end up moving toward the bridge zone into the path of ascension, or they are going to be Metatronic. And there's no third choice at this point. But there's a lot more details to that, like, oh, gee, how do I make sure I'm on, I don't think I want to go down, thank you. What we're doing right now, we won't have to, and there's going to be other things done on that I know indigos can do. I don't know what they are yet, but we're going to be given information progressively on how we can help as many people on the planet as possible. If they can't get their bodies out, if their bodies are too Metatronic, but they're still in their bodies, what this Hitharo will allow to do is something that would not have happened before. If they just got Metatronic because they didn't have enough divine blueprint to regenerate so they could get out, they would have been absorbed by the possessing consciousness, where their template would have been ripped apart. Whatever consciousness they had had or whoever they had been would have been reduced to space dust and then assimilated and eaten by the Wisadek, and the Wisadek would have taken the body. What happens now is different. There's now the ability to have a separation between the templates. If you don't have enough in your template that you can get your body through, you'll lose part of your shadow body and part of your energy, and you probably won't feel too good. But you can still get out. Some people that otherwise wouldn't have made it, that would have gone into monadic reversal from the progressive activation of the blue sword, they won't be Metatronic any more than they already are. So the parts of themselves that are still intact will, at the Hitharo point, begin. It's a 6-stage separation of the shields. The parts that can go into divine blueprint will, and the parts that are Metatronic won't. For some people, it means that they won't have enough divine blueprint at all, and these guys, like the ones that are 31% and less, it's not as hopeless for them either as it used to be. If there's still some of them in there, and they're not fully, a Wisadek in there in the first place, the Wisadek will get the body at that point because it has more control over the body than the person does. But this whole flame body activation of the planet will allow them to be whatever's left of them, to be hosted out. They will literally get caught in the wave of frequency that's the Amareya flame waves, so they can incarnate in this on this side the next time, where they don't get pulled down and assimilated. So this is why it was called the Treaty of Loving Mercy. It was an agreement to co-create the Hitharo. And I'm really curious about what they might be teaching in their workshops at this point. I've never gone to one. I think I went to one workshop where somebody was teaching this stuff, and I thought they knew more than me, and I went to find out about something, and they hadn't a clue about anything. And so I learned not to go to the workshops and try to find out more. But there's going to be a whole bunch of them that are working to help with this in their own way, almost grudgingly, though. Because if it wasn't for us getting in the way, they would have had it their way and been able to take the whole thing. So they're not doing it with a smile on their face, just kind of like a, oh, well, that was close. We are being invited to grids where we can, what we have done. It was in that paper that I read this morning that was the new stuff, how the trip to France. They didn't tell us exactly what was going on in France, except you need to do this and it has to do with this. All that detail, we didn't have any of it when we went to France. And that's because they didn't want us to get stuck in the line of fire, because there are certain groups that don't want this to happen. The Wisadraks are very upset with this whole Treaty of Loving Mercy. They were offered it too, by the way. And they decided, no, it's do or die. They will take the chance of the red pulse. Well, because they know that most of the Metatronic implants are in the Anunnaki territories. So if the beast does do its thing and it rips apart, throws a red pulse into the Wisadek matrix and blows up half their grids, it'll primarily be Anunnaki grids, not Drak grids, which means the beast will take care of their enemy for them. And now here we come in, which they consider the troublemakers again, making an agreement that they perceive as we're making friends with their enemies, which we're not doing. We're not anybody's enemies. We're here to try to stop them from doing the chaos that they're trying to do. But the Wisadraks are not happy about this, because they were hoping, they were willing to take whatever losses they might have to endure, particularly on this planet, because it would have done red pulse on this planet as well. But it would have gotten rid of most of the Anunnaki, so they would have been rulers of their black hole matrix. They're not doing direct attack right now, and I think that probably means I can feel the resistance. There's like roar, but there's some of them that I think might be getting ready to enter the Treaty of Loving Mercy. I just get a feeling. I haven't been told that, but I'm sensing that we would have been attacked to try to do harm to us, not just to try to interfere with us when we were in France. We did get some interesting things, like we got they sent us a bus for our bus trip that was filling up with carbon monoxide inside of it, and we tried to tell them, this is the most bizarre experience I ever had. Well, we already realized that the lady who had been sent to be our guide, our tour guide, had some dancer problems, and they were messing with her. And here we go again, because we get used to that. They'll like come in to mess with us through people that they're connected to, and the people don't know. But we're starting to choke. Our eyes are getting red. We're starting to cough, and I finally realized, yeah, something's going on in this bus. It's not just me. No, it's not just you. So everybody's like, we've got to get off this bus. The bus is driving, it's going around in circles, pointing out the, it's just pointing out the things. So, we came up and said, excuse me, there's carbon monoxide filling up this bus, and we're getting sick from it. We need to stop. We need, like, either stop here and let us out, or take us back to the hotel. He goes, this is not my job. I need to get you to the Louvre. And I'm, excuse me, dead or alive, you're going to get us to the Louvre, right? They wouldn't stop the bus. They kept us going. It's not my responsibility, right? I mean, she was, God bless her. I mean, we're looking at each other. It's like, if they had pushed it any further, like, who's going to commandeer this bus? Because somebody's going to get up there, sit on the bus driver's lap, and slam on the brake because we were getting sick from it. And we were supposed to go to the Louvre Museum to do what we didn't know, actually. They didn't tell us until after that we were supposed to run some of the scepter codes and things into the grids there. But what the Wisa Drax, they had set this little thingy up. What they had tried to do, they weren't trying to kill us or anything. I mean, first I thought, oh great, they're trying to kill us now. They didn't try very hard. We finally did get them to agree to, like, take us back to, after all, like, hacking, and one person's almost in an asthma attack, and, we have the closing throats and burning eyes. I mean, it was pretty bad. It was really irresponsible the way it was handled. So, it's not my responsibility. But once we got back and got to breathe again, that was right before we were supposed to go to the museum. Well, we found out later, it was like, oh, shucks, we missed. It was overkill. Because what they were trying to do was weaken us enough in the breathing that when it came time to drop the codes of the Kundalini, we wouldn't have very much force there because our breathing would be too affected at the time. And they knew that there would be a chemical issue with the carbon monoxide that would interfere with the ability of running enough frequency to activate the codes in the grids. And they missed. They pushed a little too hard, and there was a little too much carbon monoxide, where we couldn't run around for 15 more or 20 more minutes waiting for the appointment at the museum, in the bus. So we all literally demanded to get off the bus, and we got fresh air. So by the time we got there, we were all right, and we were able to run the codes. Excuse me. Interestingly.
There was a rule, right?
Oh, yeah.
Groups were not allowed to gather, stand, and talk under the apex of the
Yeah. That was another rule that our guides told us about. Oh, we did anyway. We did, yes. That was code word. Group photo! Hi, I'm a tourist. Come on, everybody, right under the pier. Yeah, because that's where we had to drop it. What was amazing about going there... Yeah, if you ever hear us say group photo, no, something's up, okay? Something's up, and there's somebody else that we don't want to know that, that we'll get in trouble for it. Yeah. So, anyway, this whole thing is yet another piece of the drama we're moving through. The Hitharo is a good thing, the great silence. I don't think I've ever been on a planet when one of those has come. I don't know if one of those has ever come to this planet or not. I think it's one of those crisis intervention technologies that are not used very frequently, only in desperate situations. And I have a feeling it's because how particularly straight do those angles have to be when they hit? The precision in the timing and all of that. There is some level that the Iani races and the Eka temple keepers all the way up are personally responsible for. There's, part of it's automatic, but part of it's kind of like knowing how to set the automatic in the right, like angle of projection or something. I can feel that there's a part that they have to do, and that's where they're hoping that with their mastery of the Templar, they will be able to do it well. It's almost like the beast in a way, but it's a good beast. But it's when you start throwing lots of current around, lots of frequency around, you might be surprised at what happens sometimes, just like the United Resistance Wisadek people were. They didn't expect. They thought they knew it could possibly happen, but they thought, it won't happen. That the beast would turn around and bite them, and that's exactly what it did. So when the higher guardian races begin to realize they're going to be using these massive currents, they don't take that responsibility lightly, and they don't take chances with it. So the success rate of this will probably be very high for them to even attempt it, because if it didn't work, I would imagine that what it could do would be just as bad as what the beast is going to do. But we are preparing our bodies to receive these activations, because what's happening in the shields of the planet and the universe and the galaxy is the codes those little symbol codes that we're being given right now, which are the mathematical programs for first the 12, 12, 12, 12 cosmic activation, and then what's actually the 1, 1, 1, 1 activation that opens the center of the shield so the Amaray 13th pillar can come down. These are activating the planetary grids. Now, if you don't go to Flame Body workshops, you don't know anything about this, it's kind of like potluck. whatever you've got in your DNA, better hope it's good. Whatever you've got in your shields, better hope nobody accidentally Metatronicked you this time around to get them activating faster, because there's literally the path of evolution for the future of the people on this planet right now is going to be determined at the Hitharo point, where the ones who phase lock into the fall will do their evolution in the Wisdom matrix. They're not going to disappear instantly. I mean, I don't think. I think they would tell me if something like that was going to happen. I would hope. Okay. Okay. Yeah. There's going to be a lot more of the technicals of, how far we have to go with this. Like, we're doing what's absolutely essential right now. We're getting flame body activations. We're activating in our shields the codes that are compatible with the Amareya flames directly. So that will ensure progressively. Now that we have these activations, it's almost like a ticket that says, okay, well, as long as I keep the activation, as long as I work with this, and I really do my best, to try to hold the frequency, which means doing, Technique 8, Part 6, Part 6, 6 steps of Technique 8, Part 2. On a, what was that? Yeah. Okay. Right. Okay. Right. 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 Okay. Yeah, as far as like how much grace and like, what time frame do we have to where it's like we can't do anything about it, and what's that going to look like if we can't? Like if we find out we're Metatronicked, what do you do? Run? No, actually. It's if you find out that your body's been Metatronicked, if you do these flame body activations, the one thing it will do for you, first of all, is it will transmute any of the rest that activates. So you've got what you've got, but it won't get worse than what it is. This will protect a lot of people from being assimilated into magentas when the Hitharo point comes in, because when that sword comes in, there's a whole bunch of them pushing in to come in for the kill on their body snatch jobs. And when we're running these when we have these frequencies activated in our shields, and we can run the 13th pillar, because when the blue sword comes in is when the 13th pillar is going to anchor. That's the 13th pillar is actually the result of after those two beams come together again and anchor, and that's what sets the progressive anchoring of the 12 pillars around it, and that goes up till 2012. But we have a time frame that it's really like being given a free hall pass, or a free pass to a concert or something, that we're being given the technologies to, if we put them in our shields, which we're doing now, and we just do a little bit of work to sustain the activations, that the planet will start to help us now, and we'll help the planet. As we do it, it helps the planet to hold more of those frequencies, and as the planet holds more, it helps us to hold more of the frequencies. And it also, every one of the indigos that activates the flame bodies progressively triggers more activations and more indigos that progressively do activations in humans. So we spread the gift. And I don't know what it's going to look like on the Hitharo day, but it is literally the peak. It starts on the 5th. It started on November 5th, which was the initiation phase. And that's when the codes started being entered into the grid, when we started moving toward the 12, 12, 12, 12, cosmic initiation thing. That will activate in the grids. The cosmic initiation thing will activate in the grids on December 21st of 2002. So that's when we get our 12, 12, 12, 12 cosmic activation. We've got the initiation now. I know. Right. That will prepare us for the next level, which is during the Hitharo we need to enter what is called the Christ 1 code, which is the 1111 going all the way down, the center code that allows the center flame to open to anchor the Amareya pillar. And it will anchor in our bodies as well as in the planetary body. What we do after that point, there's going to be a series of things that assist in the anchoring in the internal ruche. The pillars will anchor after you anchor the 13th one, which would be here. It would be clearing the 666 seed implant. So we're literally going to biologically go through the Metatronic atom splitting in our bodies. And this is going to go on inside of us as well. And not just people who are doing flame activations. This is going to go on inside everybody's catharic grid. And at least if we know about it and we understand what's happening, we can start to be a conscious part of the process of doing whatever is the best thing to do in that scenario. Yes? All right, to get up to the Hitharo point, as far as I know, it's just the 12, 12, 12, 12, and then the 1, 1, 1, 1, which all comes in on one code on the day of the Hitharo. All right, so before the Hitharo, what we're working with are the 4 codes that we were given in France. Now, you've gone past Technique 12. You're going to get Technique 12 now, because I want to have it typed up so you could take it home, too. Because you can play with these a little more if you want to. Like, you don't ever have to do these again if you don't want to. Once it's activated, it's there, and as long as you do that Technique 8 Part 2, you'll keep it activated. But if you want to amplify it, you can play with these codes. You can run them again. It won't hurt. You can't run too much. It'll just stop. It'll shut it off or it won't do anymore. But that's why I wanted you to have the techniques to take home with you. You will do 12 tonight, Technique 12, and 16 and 17 and 18 we'll teach you how to do, but I didn't have time to typeset it, so you got just what the people in France got, which is like it's in longhand because we had to do it that way and just photocopied it that way. It's called the Bedahuva scan. Now that's not a technique you have to do. That's to help you get some more insight into yourself, and there's going to be more given on that later as we go. But the activations themselves, they're quite simple, and they don't take very long. They're not the real long ones like the other ones were, and it's just code induction primarily, inducing those 4, the 4 codes. The one set of codes was interesting because the 12, 12, 12, 12, we couldn't activate in the normal way through optical pineal induction. The Aura Menu code, which is VECA 12, it's not ready to activate yet, and the grids are in the shields. But there's an override system that you can expedite activation, and it's by using what's called the monadic code, which is not the Rihanna, the Rushaya, with the VECA code 11, which is the Thuna Menu, that together they will create what's called the 1111 universal level activation, which means code 11 and the VECA level and its parallel activate together because of the way they run, and that triggers the beginning activation, natural activation of the Aura Menu 12 code, so you can get the 12, 12, 12, 12. So there's 2 techniques that combine in there. They have to do with codes that aren't the one we need to activate, but they create the activation of that code if you use them. I mean, this stuff was complicated. I was like, what? I'm writing this up and oh my God. This is why today was very long for me as well as, if it was long for you. That's why I didn't come down. It's not that I didn't want to talk with you all. It was just that I wanted to make sure, first of all, it was clear. I couldn't have explained some of this until, I just let them, give me all of that information. So this is what we're preparing for. Let me see. I think there may be a couple. Oh, on the planetary level. Which part? Oh, I'm not sure. He was getting it from I was talking to him, and I'm not sure. But he can come back and talk about it because I'd like to hear it too. Yeah, we both at this point we both do. We have Ma will tune in and kind of hang out in the mentor space and tell us live if there's something we need to know. So we learn with you guys sometimes. Or, gee, I didn't know that either 2 seconds ago till it fell out my mouth. Thank you. Yeah. Yes. That was one of those things that fell out. That I would have to actually go back and ask him, and what that was about. Yeah, 10 minutes to break. Okay. Now I want to get through a little bit more of these. Oh, I do want to get through this one. All right. This is just to show you something. That question I couldn't answer right now. It was talking about something that was said spontaneously in Greece about numbers of how many need to do to activate to get how many rest of the grids or something through. Was it? You remember that? I'm glad. 2,000 of us, of the indigos, have to activate, and that'll do what? Okay, so at least the flame body will activate on the planetary level. Yeah, but that doesn't mean you fix everybody. Right. Right. Okay. Exactly. Okay. Yeah. This is one of those things that even though I'm there, things just kind of race through my mouth, and I listen to them as they go. And if I haven't had time to write it down, it doesn't stick in my 3rd strand. It's in my 5th strand, which means I can speak it, but once it's gone, it's gone. If I anchor it in D3, I have to write it down. That's why we do the writing sometimes. So there's some information sometimes that people from the workshops will remember that I said more than I remember, and I have to go back and watch the tape and say, okay, what was that about? And if I slow it down, say, oh yeah, that was what it was about, and I'll take notes. That's it. Then the whole thing I'll remember it when I start taking the notes. So that's just part of my process. I don't know if you'll be like that. Well, heck, in the old days, speakers would go around and speak, and then they wouldn't remember either. Sometimes he would. It always used to be an old kind of standing rule that whatever you could remember is what belonged to you. You were ready for it. And if you couldn't remember it, you weren't ready for it. But that rule has kind of been like suspended for this particular stellar activation cycle because we'd all be down in Weesadak talking about it. You know? So now on the planetary level, I just want to show you part of this mess of wonderful arcs coming in. This isn't even showing where the blue sword comes in. We're just learning about that. But this, I'm not even going to try to describe from here to here to here, because there's a bunch of other interfaces too that are happening now. These white arcs were originally what was called the Amareya Arc Project. They were the Amareya Mother Arcs. They were the smaller arcs that were going to be sent down before they decided to literally open the full Pillar 13 through the Hitharo. They're going to come in too, but we're also getting this series, and this is just a really rough little thing. I was getting it really quick. What was that? Where was that? That's where these are all scribbled down. They hadn't had time to be typeset or anything, to add the new information. But you're going to have all these other arcs called the Eros